About a minute after 1 o'clock. It looks like we have plenty of folks online now, so we'll go ahead and get started with our F&P meeting. And the first item of business today is the approval of the agenda. So does anybody have any changes to the agenda as proposed? You all should have received a recent email here from Bethany with updated staff report, but the agenda should be the same. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is approval of the September 22nd minutes. And with this, we'll both be approving this, and as we approve or oppose, staff will be taking roll call as well. So do we have any discussion on the September minutes? Hearing no discussion, I would ask for a motion and a second.
Mr. Chair, this is Nancy Spooner-Walsh. I move that we accept the minutes of the meeting.
Thank you, Nancy. We got a move. We have a second.
Mr. Chair, this is Ken. I'll second.
All right, Ashfeld seconds. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, I will ask staff to take the vote on this item.
Okay, OJ?
Aye.
Stenson?
I was not present.
Okay, Fabish?
Aye.
Piper?
Aye.
Merrick?
Aye.
Jensen?
Aye.
Ayers Johnson?
Aye.
Kotsukos?
Aye.
Hinneker?
Aye.
Janowiak?
Aye.
Carr? Jody, are you sitting in for Molly?
Yes, aye.
Brown?
Aye.
Ao? Ao, if you had a vote, I missed it.
You mean AO?
I'm sorry?
You mean Innocent AO? I didn't hear the last
Yes.
name. Oh, yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Mackenzie Turner Bargan? Okay, Spooner Walsh?
Aye.
Picone?
Aye.
Keel? Omi?
Aye.
Ellis?
Aye.
Kozlucher?
Aye.
Ashfeld?
Aye.
Thompson?
Aye.
Coster?
Aye.
And Weber.
Aye.
Okay, and the minutes are approved. Next item of business is public comment on committee business. I'll ask Bethany or staff if we have anyone from the public that would like to comment.
We did not receive any public requests.
Okay, thank you, Bethany. Next item, I will turn it over to Elaine for the tab report.
Thank you, Chair. The tab met yesterday afternoon. We had a record-long meeting. I think we went till from 12:30 to 3:30. So Chair Hovland reported that the executive committee had met and reviewed the tab materials, and he emphasized that there would be polling during the regional solicitation presentation to reduce the scenarios for staff to bring back next month. Chair Hovland announced that Jeff Weisensell, the Rosemont City Council member, has been appointed by Metro Cities to fill a position that opened when Gary Hansen was appointed the Suburban Transit Association tab representative. He highlighted that a Scott County project in downtown Prior Lake that was funded through the regional solicitation received a 2021 ITE Transportation Achievement Award for traffic engineering, and the project was highlighted in the September 2022 ITE journal. MnDOT and MPCA did not have reports. Metropolitan Airports Commission reported that the airport received an award from JD Powers for #1 airport. And the airport expected to be very busy this weekend with MEA weekend. Delta has opened a route in Seoul, South Korea. And then in March 2023, they will add a route to Japan. They also had a tour from the Expo 2027 group, tour the MSP airport to determine whether it could handle the capacity for attendees flying into MSP should Bloomington be selected to be the 2027 Expo holder. For the Met Council report, Deb Barber reported on the groundbreaking for the Gold Line was that morning. The D Line opening event will be December 3rd. Ridership numbers are at the highest monthly total since COVID began 2 years ago, and ridership was more than 3.8 million in September. For the Suburban Transit Association, Gary Hansen reported that for Southwest Transit, Southwest Prime continues to grow, and it now accounts for 20% of their Prime ridership is service to the Mall of America and airport. And Express service saw a 25% increase due to startup UMM classes, and they will begin an investment grade audit of its facilities and fleet telematics study. Plymouth Metrolink continues to grow slowly. However, its on-demand service is nearly back to pre-pandemic levels. Plymouth did receive, or they were awarded a $15 million DOT raise funds for Station 73 Transit and Regional Improvement Project. And in MBTA, ridership continues to grow, and similar to Southwest Prime, the MBTA Connect continues to grow at record pace. Both Southwest Transit and MBTA are seeing unmet demand for services and are constrained by purchasing additional vehicles. For action items, TAB approved 3 streamlined tip amendments. First Dakota County, the Minnesota River Greenway project, adding a pedestrian bridge near the project. Also, Southwest Transit project, adding electric buses and a charging station. And for Metro Transit, an electric bus purchase. And then they had information item on the MnDOT and Anoka County Small Business Initiative. When the TAB defederalized a project a few years ago, Anoka County did not have their own DBE goal setting, so they coordinated with Anoka and with the MnDOT to train, provide some funding for training for ADA consultants. There was a presentation by Carrie Festog on the Highway Safety Improvement Program, 2 lists of projects. And then Steve Peterson presented on regional solicitation funding scenarios. And I will hold off on going through these. Steve has incorporated the TAB comments into the slides that he was going to present. And then also, Chair Hovland announced that Janet Williams, the mayor of Savage, received the League of Minnesota Cities Award for Outstanding Public Service. And that's a very brief summary of the full TAB meeting.
Thank you, Elaine. A good update. Are there any questions for Elaine? Okay, not seeing any. We will move on. Thanks again,
Chair,
Elaine.
sorry, I was Nathan from Minneapolis. I think I caught it from Elaine, but like the conversation about unique projects, scenarios, rules, that's going to be in Steve's presentation later.
Yes, there was several things. I could give a little summary. TAB was presented, the different scenarios, and then there were some questions that we had them pulled to give some direction to staff to then present to the technical committees. They related to the BRT rule for 32 million maximum, whether to change that or not, where to put additional transit funding, and then selecting the unique projects and what additional funding there was for that. So Steve's going to go through the discussion on where they landed and where go into the proposals or the new scenarios. And then also the carbon reduction funds, there was some discussion on that, so made some recommendations. So those are the 4 main things that they were pulled on.
All right, thanks, Elaine. I saw a thumbs up from Nathan, so I think his answer or his question was answered, and we'll hear more from Steve as well. All right, we will move on now to business. So we have 4 official business items. The first being Maple Grove program year extension. So I'll turn this over to Joe.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. The reason that we are here is for this item. I'm going to share the screen just to show the item if I can figure it out. All right. So this is a program year extension from the city of Maple Grove. They were awarded $7 million for a 4-lane divided highway and an expansion of the Minnesota 10 interchange at I-94 in 2018. And the project was and remains programmed in fiscal year 23. Maple Grove is requesting that it be extended to fiscal year 24, and that's due to the federal authorization taking longer than expected. This is primarily due to the inclusion of the partial interchange construction. So unlike some of the recent program year extensions we've had, this one is pretty according to the design of the policy. It was, we have a program year assessment attached where a minimum of 7 points is needed. MnDOT State Aid has determined that there's a score of 8 here. Therefore, the project should be able to meet its 2024 program year per that request. The city understands that they're actually being slotted for now for 2026, I believe, funding. What did we put here? And or 2027 rather funding. Though perhaps they'll be able to get funding reimbursed earlier if various things could happen. So I'm going to scroll down to a little map of the project. Otherwise, that's really all I have. And with that, I am here for questions.
Okay, thank you for that overview, Joe. I know it looks like we have Ken Ashfield and John Hagan on. Is there anything that the applicant wants to add to the presentation here?
Chairman Thompson, John Hagan is with us today, and I'll let him speak for the project.
Hello. Hi, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank Joe for his summary of our program year extension. Essentially, we are moving along and optimistic that we will still be able to meet the necessary deadline to actually get authorization to bid the project and move forward in 2023. However, given the timing of the approvals necessary for the program year 2023, we don't want to lose the funding altogether. And so we do understand that it might take longer for us to get reimbursed for this, but we didn't want to lose it altogether as a result of some delays in our federal approvals due to the partial interchange. So we appreciate your consideration and your time, and that's all that we had.
All right, thank you, John. Are there any questions for John at this time? If not, I would open it up to the group for discussion.
Hey, this is Molly McCartney from MnDOT.
Yep.
Hi. So MnDOT Maple Grove applied and was awarded a TAD grant for this project. It's currently programmed in the TIP in 23, but we can work to make that move to correspond with the letting year, and it probably will help our agency with budget authority in the long run. So thank you, Maple Grove.
Thank you for that, Molly. All right, we'll need a motion and a second on this item.
Mr. Chair, this is Colleen Brown, and I move to approve the request.
All right, Colleen moves. We have a second.
I'll second it.
Okay, I heard Molly second it. So we have Colleen and Molly. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, I'll turn it over to staff to take the vote.
Okay, thank you, Chair. OJ,
Aye.
Stenson,
Aye.
Babish,
Aye.
Piper,
Aye.
Merrick,
Aye.
Jensen,
Aye.
Ayers Johnson,
Aye.
Kotsukos,
Aye.
Hiniker,
Aye.
Janowiak,
Aye.
McCartney,
Aye.
Brown,
Aye.
Ayo,
Aye.
Turner Bargan,
This is Samuelson for Turner Bargain. I vote aye.
thank you. Spooner Walsh,
Aye.
Pacone,
Aye.
Keel, Omi,
Aye.
Ellis,
Aye.
Kozlucher,
Aye.
Ashfeld,
Aye.
Thompson,
Aye.
Coster,
Aye.
Weber.
Aye.
Okay, and that motion passes. We will move on to the next item of business, which is the Regional Solicitation Project Selection. So Steve, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair and members. So after 2 years, we're finally to the action item stage, which is great. It's exciting for us too. So as Elaine noted, we did have a TAB meeting yesterday, a rather long one, where we did ask and received some clarity on a few issues that we wanted to bring to them. And so apologize for the information coming out before the meeting, but that was the schedule before us. So we want to, if you could bring up the PowerPoint, Bethany, we go through that. So what we're asking of you today is to forward the remaining options and also put together a list of key differences between, well, now we have 3 remaining options and other technical feedback that you'd like to provide TAB in it making its decision. So we're not asking you to recommend this option or that option, but we do want to kind of identify the key differentiating factors between the remaining 3 options and provide that as information to TAB. We did try and do almost like a pro and cons list at the last TAC meeting for those that were there. It was difficult to do, and so that's why a little bit we changed our approach to the key differences between the scenarios as kind of a similar but maybe a little easier approach. Next slide. So here's the schedule. We're here today on the 20th to TAB on the 16th of November, and then a month later, roughly, it'll go before the full council for concurrence. Next slide. Now, a few things have changed since last time you saw the charts, and wanted to identify those. This is similar to what we brought to TAB yesterday. We did indicate where the old funding line would have been. You know, we did have 200 million available usually. Now we have 300 million available because of IIJA. So we were asked to put in the tables where that old funding line would have been and kind of what are the new projects you get with the increased funding. Number 2, Ramsey County asked us to put in projects that had other competitive sources. Number 3, we did differentiate the tables or the colors in the table to show the new funding sources in different colors. And we'll kind of go through that in a second. We got some good clarity from this group last month on how to approach the Hsip question. As far as could projects be partially funded in Hsip in the regional solicitation? And remember, this group said, no, the rule says kind of clearly one or the other. So let's clarify that for next round. But for this round, let's follow that rule to a T. And so we've done that. What that did was allowed us to fund a few more Hsip projects on the list, and that's an action item, 2 action items up here. And then lastly, we did fund that last bridge project, 5 out of 5 for the bridge projects. And once we get in the tables, I can kind of show you that as well. Next slide. Another topic was the carbon reduction program. And we brought this question to both TAB and to our transportation committee, who recommended that we put 2 years of the money towards the regional solicitation. So again, the money there, 23 through 27. MnDOT has a carbon reduction strategy that's due at the end of November of 2023. So the thought was to put it into bike ped because of the length of those lists, and also also to hold on the rest of the money until the planning has time to catch up. So the money's still there, 25, 26, 27 and beyond if it continues. But just due to time constraints, Transportation Committee is recommending that we do 2 years or $16 million. Next slide. So one thing we did hear yesterday at TAB, we brought them 2 options in bike ped. Do you want to use that on the do you want to use the $16 million on the bigger projects, the multi-use trail projects? Or do you want to sprinkle those projects and get more projects and pedestrian facilities and safe routes to school? Two approaches. Their preference was to do it on smaller projects, in part because you can spread the money to a lot of different applicants throughout the region. And 2, certainly pedestrian safety issues are top of mind for a lot of folks today as well. So with that, we've narrowed, because of that guidance, we did narrow down the carbon reduction options just back to that one option, option 2. And so that's a change that you'll see on the charts. Next slide. As Elaine talked about, keep going. We went through a series of polling questions with TAB yesterday, and we did, so we're highlighting where TAB landed on these things. So one was, do you follow the BRT rule, yes or no? They said yes. So that left a sum of money available. Next slide. Available. There was 2 remaining TDM projects that you could fund on the list for just under $1 million. They voted to not fund those projects. So that, the next slide. One more. Oh, back one here. Maybe have a little delay. So then the question was where to put the $4 million in the midpoint scenario and $3 million in the bike ped heavy scenario, where to shift that remaining transit TDM money. We didn't get great clarity on that. And we had kind of a mixed opinion, as it says there, but many wanted to kind of wait and see what happened. Say if you funded midpoint, maybe they want to shift that money, that remainder of money to bike ped, or if you funded bike ped heavy, maybe they wanted to shift it to roadways. So that changed our thinking a little bit on our approach, and so you'll see what we came up with to address this feedback in a few minutes. Next slide. Third kind of major topic area would be the unique projects. The scoring committee met a little over a week and a half ago. Recommended actually what you see as A on the options. I had a lot of good conversation on this, and TAB is recommending that we fund both the TBI and the top 2 scoring projects. That's the mobility hubs, EV spot network, strategic expansion projects. So that by funding those top 2 scoring projects, there is still 1 project left remaining, and the remaining funds that have been set aside amounts to about $727,000, as kind of shown on the screen. Next slide. And then we ran out of time. So, at one point, if you only funded the top project, then you were left with $2 million. Now we're left with more like 700,000. So it's not quite as impactful as to what you do with the money. That question is a little less important, but acknowledge we did run out of time here at the end of the meeting to discuss that question. And Elaine, I just want to give you a chance here to kind of add anything you'd like to on from the TAB perspective yesterday.
Elaine, you might be on mute.
Yes, I was. I think I'd get this by now. TAB did, by the time I got to the unique projects and talking extra money, it was confusing to them where this funding would go until they knew which scenario they were going to, and they would potentially pick a different place to go for the funding depending on which scenario was chosen. And so I think they were, it might be also with because of that, that was where 3 scenarios were then developed, which Steve will get to, because it kind of gives them an idea of which scenario you select. Here's the extra funding from either the transit or unique, where it would go to. It was got to the point if they couldn't say where it would go, and they would change their decision if it was a different scenario.
Yeah. Thanks, Elaine. Maybe before we go on, any questions on TAB or the direction we got yesterday? Went fairly quick on purpose because I want to get to the heart of the meeting here, but any questions?
Yeah, one thing I could add is TAB is looking at how they're distributing the funds, trying to stay on the policy level versus looking at projects. Do they want to do reconstruction? Do they want to do expansion? Do they want to be safety, bike ped? And where would putting these money help? I think safety was a big one for them. So which projects would have that? So that's where their discussion was, instead of looking at specific projects.
Yeah, good point. Okay, next slide. So this brings us to the 3 scenarios that we want to bring you today, and it's really the first scenario. Midpoint is what you saw before, but then B1 and B2 are iterations of the bike ped heavy scenario. So let me just maybe explain what we did here. The midpoint again starts with the midpoints, but it takes that extra transit money, which is $4 million, and puts it over into bike ped. So that's midpoint plus extra bike ped. And that is essentially what we were showing to TAB in the funding scenarios. We did have to pull back a little bit on the bike ped investment that's shown in the tables relative to TAB yesterday, because we did assume the recommendation out of the scoring committee for unique projects was that they were only going to fund 1 project. And so with that recommendation, that's how we approached the funding. So when TAB directed us to show funding for the top 2 scoring projects, that resulted in us having to show less bike ped projects being funded in the tables for you today. So if you kind of compare the 2, there is less bike ped funding across all scenarios because we funded that second unique project. So anyway, that's A is the midpoint plus the extra to bike ped, about $4 million. B1, a bike ped heavy, plus the extra to roadways. So the extra on the bike ped heavy scenario is about $3 million. So we're not talking about large sums of money here, but it's the bike ped heavy, the orange one you saw before. But instead of putting the extra money into bike ped, we heard from some of the TAB members, well, if you kind of lean heavy to bike ped already, do we want to kind of double lean that direction, or do we want to shift it back to roadways? So we thought this was a good option, a new option that's shown in pink. Bike ped heavy, but that last $3 million goes back to roadway instead of bike ped. And limits maybe the shift away from roadways, which was $11 million from midpoint to bike ped heavy, shifts it back to $8 million roughly, and that's shown on the screen. So B2 is bike ped heavy, plus that extra $3 million to bike ped. That's orange, similar to what you've seen before. So that's bike ped heavy plus another $3 million. It does go slightly above the tab modal range. So again, the modal funding range for bicycle pedestrian in the application was 9% to 20%. By putting that extra $3 million into bike ped, again, the base amount's 300 million. So if you add another 3 million, that's 1%. So we go from 20%, we hit that bike ped heavy means go to the top of the range. So 20%, then we add another 3 million. So now we're at 21%. Going to bike ped. So that's one thing we wanted to acknowledge here too, and that's maybe a key difference between these. Next slide. And here's roughly how it shakes out. And I tried to put in B1 and B2 kind of the difference between the midpoint and each of those. So you can see, as I just talked about, if you're in the midpoint, 167 million for roadways, bike ped, heavy plus extra roadway B1, minus 8 million, bike ped plus bike ped B2, it's $11 million. And so you can kind of see what the shifts are a little bit. That's at least interesting for me to think through kind of what are the differences between the scenarios as we start developing that table. Next slide.
Chair, can I just ask a quick question since we're throwing around so many numbers here?
Yeah, go ahead, Nathan.
So when we describe midpoint, does that include all the bridge and carbon reduction, or is that before the carbon reduction money? I know a lot of this might have been talked about in September when I was unable to make it, but I just been struggling to figure that out. So that would help clarify like what we're talking about between these two.
Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Chair and members. So Nathan, the answer to your question is we did not include the bridge funding for the most part. We'll talk a little bit in the tables, but for the most part, we didn't include the bridge funding or the carbon reduction in the modal funding ranges. And the reason we did that was because the application was approved prior to IIJA. So they TAB made a decision on the modal funding ranges, and then we got 2 new programs that we had never heard of before. So we thought it was best to exclude both of them from the modal funding ranges.
Chair Steve, that's really helpful because I couldn't interpret if this was like resetting the midpoint to be more road heavy, or if we just kind of picked a baseline so it was more apples to apples across the year. So thank you, that really helps.
Yeah.
All right, Steve, you want to continue?
Sure. Yep. So again, the next steps today, the main goal is to, with this action item, is to come out with a listing of key differences between the options and other technical input that you'd like to provide. We've got 2 separate action items today. One is the solicitation, and then number 2 is carbon reduction, although that's a little less interesting now that we're down to just one option for each scenario. So let's maybe flip over to the tables if we could, please, Bethany. Yep, and you can see at the front end of this action transmittal, we did, with track changes, Bethany did modify some of the language to reflect this new funding scenario. I think that was a good approach to use track changes on that, Bethany. Yep. Okay, so what we did was we stuck that pink new scenario right in the middle, because it really, from a funding perspective, it and how much you fund for bike ped or for roadways on the other side, it really, those are the 2 bookends, and this is in between to some extent. So that's what you see here in pink is the new one, B1. And you'll notice that both the blue and the orange are very similar to what you saw last month, with a few small changes. If we could go to the second page of this. We, you know, the on-system bridge money, I know at least one member wanted to maybe talk a little bit more about this too, was we have $22 million total for the bridge on-system bridge program, the new bridge program. And kind of late in the process, we learned that we had a little bit more flexibility on the years. Because part of the problem was how do we generate a new federally funded bridge project for 2023 or 24? Both are almost impossible to do. So we had originally planned to put the money on previously selected bridge projects back from the last funding cycle, essentially swap out that money, and then through a series of kind of shifting, it would go back into this regional solicitation, into the larger pot. So once we got direction from MnDOT that they'd like to see new bridge projects, not just kind of a swapping of the money, plus they gave us some flexibility in the years, that led us to fund that 5th bridge project on the list for $5.5 million. So right now, as shown in the modal funding splits, that 5th bridge project is coming out of the roadway funding. So if you add it up, 5.5 million is coming from the roadway versus on-system bridges, just to kind of make the to make it even out a little bit more. So that's we did add a footnote to that, but I know maybe you want to have a little discussion on that. I see one hand up here, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I can't see the hand, but okay, Angie.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Somewhere
Mr.
on your
Chair.
list, yes.
Yes, Mr. Chair and Steve. Really, originally I wanted to understand that the math was working out as the projects in blue add up to 162 million. So it does help to understand that then the $5.5 million bridge is added into that roadway modal split. So really my question is, with that clarification from MnDOT about the fiscal year, can that $5.5 million bridge project be funded with bridge funds, thus kind of returning to the other couple projects that were previously shown as part of the midpoint scenario? So really needing clarification about the bridge funds and where that project will be funded from. Thanks.
Yeah, is
Okay.
that maybe a question for Molly or Steve?
Yeah, I'll take a first crack at it here. So I think so what happened at the last TAC meeting, if you could scroll up one more page. To fund that 5th bridge project, what we did in roadways last time was we removed number 3 on that list, on the traffic management technologies list, City of St. Paul Equity Bonus Project, and we also removed Hennepin County Maple Grove, my eyes aren't that good, Spot Mobility Project that was next on the list. So depending on what this group thinks, what we could do is return and fund those 2 projects, and then take that 5th bridge project kind of more purely out of the bridge funding, I think is what essentially we would do.
All right, I don't know, Molly, if you're on, if you want to add anything to that, or anybody from MnDOT.
I don't have anything to add unless there's a question.
Okay, Angie, does that address your question?
Yes, so the bridge project shown would be funded with bridge funding, which would then kind of revert us back to adding in about $5 million of projects that were taken out last time. that correct?
Yeah, if the committee wanted to do that, we'd pick those same projects essentially that were removed, which we never like to do. Never like to show something on as funded and then unfunded. The open question would be in that middle scenario, the pink scenario. We had enough money to go back and fund those projects. Now with the transit money shifting back, so we would have a little bit of money there to think about what to do with. I would be able to recommend something if you if the group wants me to, or if you want to think about it too, that would be open to. But I based on our process and how we allocated money, there'd be kind of a logical next project there.
Okay, thank you. It very much helps me understand essentially the math, that the projects in blue are equaling the 162, and then kind of where that other 5.5 million came from. So thank you, and I'll keep going. Thank you.
Okay. I'm scrolling down on the list here.
Chair, this is Jason from Hennepin. Can I just ask a quick clarifying question?
Yeah, please do, Jason.
Sure. So that scenario we just walked through related to the bridge category, the 5.5 million currently slated for project 5 in the bridge category, those funds would be returned to non-bridge categories, but then we'd find an alternative means to fund that 5th bridge through the on-system bridge program. So then it would still get funded. It'd just be a different color of federal money.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
So we'd probably, start thinking about what the committee wants to do, but we'd probably want to include that in a motion too, eventually, if people want to do that. So just be thinking about where you may want to land on that. So then we get into transit. So again, Tab told us to hold on the rule, so you can see what we do have. We do skip one project. That's BRT, but luckily we do have, a lot, since we do have the increase in funding, we are able to fund most all of the transit projects, which is, so that's good. Next page. Here on, just spend a little bit of time. And so again, we condensed what was 2 carbon reduction options down to 1. So now we're just adding on to the green, or we're adding on, it's an add-on to the end of that list. Wherever that list ends, we're adding on with the intent of that is to go as far down the bike ped and safe routes lists as we can. So you can see there is a few projects we're funding with carbon reduction up above. But then down below we're funding either 9 or 10 out of 10 for pedestrian projects and 10 out of 10 for safe routes to school projects. Didn't hear much hesitancy from the tab, especially on the safe routes to school. They were very interested in funding out that list. And so that's currently where we've put the money. So any questions?
Sure, Steve, on the bike ped option, we would not be splitting a tie on project 16 between Scott County and Three Rivers. And from a policy level, I think there's been a lot of discussion about following the rules, and I'm just curious how that played out. And we would be basically having to choose between 2 scored projects that are tied.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. So Nathan, this came up at TAC as well. For those on TAC, people, and if you look at the far left column, you can see where we've got a tie for number 14, and we got a tie at 16, and they're all $4 to $5.5 million projects. And of course, that's where the funding line is hitting us this cycle. We heard at TAC they didn't like splitting a tie. But then we did hear from Three Rivers, who would be kind of on that bottom side of that tie, that they were okay being split. And the reason for that is because they have 3 other projects being funded in this category up above. So they acknowledged in the meeting that they would be okay with splitting that tie. Elaine, you want to add something?
Well, I just wanted to add that isn't specifically a rule for the solicitation. That's just been a practice of TAB and not splitting them up. That we don't have it as a written rule.
And Steve, you mentioned like how you're on the top or bottom of a tie. How do you become on the top of a tie versus the bottom? Just, for future reference, if that happens.
Yeah, that maybe Mr. Chair and members, sounds good. Yes, M&A weekend's great. There's no particular order why a project is on the top or the bottom of that list, and the reason we fund in this case. So you may ask the question, why do we fund the Scott County project and not Three Rivers? It was primarily because one, it was a resubmittal. I guess that was probably we kind of look at some of those tiebreakers like resubmittal, equity bonus project, safety high score. In this case, the Scott County one was a resubmittal, so that gave it maybe a teeny leg up, right, Elaine?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, you only have so much money, so you got to figure out where to draw the line. Yeah.
But in the other ties that are just above it, in those 2 cases, we're able to fund both. 14 to 15 are tied on that list, and we were able to hit both of those. So that was good. Yeah. Any other questions?
Thank you.
And Steve, you're looking for feedback on everything here, correct? At this time?
Yeah. So the next step, if there's no further questions, we wanted to have Joe.
I had my hand up for about 5 minutes now, so I was just wondering.
Oh, none of us.
Okay,
this new
Craig,
WebEx,
I recognize
sorry
the
about
voice. That's Craig, but yeah, I can't see the hand, so feel free to just chime in. So Craig?
Yeah, thanks. So with like I said, with the tie, and Steve's correct that Three Rivers is more than happy with the projects they have and not looking to take on another project, and they support our project. So in the last examples, we were funded in 3 of 4 options. Now we're in 1 of 3. And I'm just wondering, when that regional balance stuff comes into discussion, would that play into things because of looking at where a lot of these pedestrian and other projects are being funded? It's a high percentage in the core. So, with this being our highest priority project in the county, I guess that's just one thing I'm just kind of want to bring up.
Yeah, Steve, is there, if this, after the discussion today, the TAB could come back and say, well, maybe we do want to push a little more of the carbon reduction towards multi-use trails. So there's still a flexibility for them to make some of those decisions, correct?
Yes, there is. Yes, Mr. Chair. So essentially what happened was, 1, we lost a little bit of money because of the unique project decision. 2, TAB said they wanted to use the carbon money to go down the Safe Routes to School and PED list. So where we were funding a few of those projects that Craig's talking about previously, we got direction kind of go the other way. So now I think you need to look at the list and say, well, did we kind of overdo it or not, going down below in those other 2 lists?
Yeah, and I would say they were just kind of shoot from the hip when they're talking about all this. So I don't even know they understood the impacts.
Yeah, especially at Mr. Chair and member. So it's this next meeting too, especially of TAB, they'll have an opportunity to work through kind of the last couple projects on the list if they want to. You know, they have to have reasoning, but one of the lenses they look at is geographic balance in the past few cycles. So, you know, that's their prerogative, I guess, at the tab level.
Yeah, well, hopefully they will look at that. I mean, in the pedestrian facilities area, it does seem pretty metro-centric. But again, that's more of a policy equity decision. But so you kind of got the gist of where Craig's coming from on that item. Anything else to add on that, Steve?
Yeah, you know, we did have tables of geographic balance. So, you know, I'm thinking about kind of this group and what they could supply. So, you know, one option is there something kind of on a key differences between the options that you want to, Craig or others want to point out to kind of bring that issue to the forefront. So that's kind of what I'm trying to think through a little bit.
Okay, yeah, I think we'll get through all of the discussion and then maybe at the end, we'll kind of come back to some of these common threads that come up. So Angie, you're up next.
Yes, I have a couple of other technical items to mention. So first, with the bike ped heavy scenario with the transit projects, there is one transit project that is eligible, but it is not funded. The last one on the list, Southwest Transit. And I just want to verify, were they asked about a potential partial award, realizing that it would be the 2.9 million left and they requested 4.8. So I understand we're talking about moving that to a different modal area, but just as the technical committee wanted to make sure that, I guess, that there wasn't, you know, somewhere else to put that within the mode. So that's one of my questions. And I understand it would be partial funded, so, you know, and we don't always, you know, do that, or agencies don't prefer that. So just wanted to bring that up for a question.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair and members, I'd have to ask Elaine too if we kind of formally asked about partial funding. I know we tried to steer away, you know, now we're at $300 million plus, and the two partially funded projects last time, you know, people didn't like that approach. So while you could, I guess, theoretically do it, we tried to stay away from it because we had so much money and people didn't, at least on the technical level, didn't like that last time. But Elaine, I don't know, anything to add?
No, other than that, it really wasn't discussed.
Yeah.
Right, any other discussion points, Angie, that you have?
Yes, so I would like to discuss or get feedback, at least from the committee, on, yes, what would be the base roadway projects within the bike ped heavy scenario. Specifically, the modal split available potentially within the red. It's saying so that would be adding that transit mode over the overage would be the 159.5. And actually what's shown in blue is equaling 162 million. So it's only 2.5 million short of that target. So I would request more consistency with what's in the midpoint within the roadway projects to move forward towards the bike ped heavy roadway instead of actually adding on 3 more projects. So I wanted to bring that forward now that the modal splits have changed a little bit and is actually very close between what's being shown in the blue and the modal split available, only a difference of 2.5 million. Thanks.
All right, Angie, just so I can follow that. So in the roadway reconstruction modernization, you want to get funded down to which scenario and which project? Could you?
So the projects in blue add up to 162 million because it's not including that bridge project. And within specifically the red scenario, there is 159.5 available. And so I would request for more consistency between the two, basically to include the projects in the blue and look for 2.5 million to cut, knowing that that even could be a Carver County project.
Okay, thank
But
you.
I actually, and I have not really gotten a good explanation as to why we would not generate the subsequent scenarios from the midpoint scenario. It's actually a very different roadway project list than what's in the midpoint.
Okay. Innocent.
Oh, yes. Steve, I was just had some explanation. I was wondering on the BRT rule, was there any issue in the past that they needed some change on it or not to follow the rule anymore? Or did it work out the way we wanted?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and members. So the TAC group recommendation was to follow the BRT rule as written and amend it for next cycle if needed. And TAB agreed with that TAC recommendation. So the difficult part was we went from 200 million to 300 million, but we had a set rule for a set dollar amount. So some of the thinking was, should it be more percentage based, or is there a different approach that we could take so we don't get kind of caught a little bit with fluctuating dollar amounts being available, but then we got a set ceiling.
Yeah, I can reiterate. Yeah, that is what Tab said. Next time, instead of setting an amount, let's look at a percent for the BRT.
Okay, right. Then the rest of the remaining funding will be used on transit projects, right?
Mr. Chair and members, the answer to that is no. The remaining money, $4 million in midpoint and $3 million in the 2 bike ped heavy scenarios, are shifted elsewhere. And that was the question we asked in the, I guess, number 2 and number 3 on that list of polling questions. So, that's the direction we got from TAB, was that small remainder of money got shifted either to bike ped or roadways.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else have any feedback? Please speak up. Cole.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Cole. And maybe for a question for Steve or Elaine, I feel like at TAB yesterday, there was some mention of support for more reconstruction, modernization, roadway projects. And I feel like we may have also heard that at TAC, this idea that roadway is more of a reconstruction, modernization is more of a focus. I just wanted to know if you guys remember that, or if I'm way off in what I remember from those 2 meetings.
There was some mention of it at TAB related to when you're reconstructing, it's more safety than maybe an expansion project would be. It was more that their focus was on selecting projects for safety. So if the reconstruction projects were, or spot mobility possibly, or traffic management technologies, that's what they were looking toward, because they figured those would be safety benefits so similar as a bike ped project. I mean, that's what I picked out from TAB anyway.
Cole, did you get something else out of that at the TAB discussion?
Yeah, I think there was just an acknowledgement too that the 2 scenarios funded more modernization projects. To Angie's point, there is a decision to be made, but the TAB members definitely, at least one of them, recognize that we're getting more reconstruction under those scenarios.
And that goes toward their discussion of looking at the projects as a policy, what types of projects we want to fund versus specific projects.
Yeah, Cole, you got some other comments or questions on all of the scenarios?
Nope, that's great. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, so, I mean, maybe Steve, you can jump in. I mean, the things I've heard so far, the fifth bridge, the 5.5 million was a discussion point. Maybe looking at pushing more of the small pet projects to multi-use to better even that out with some of the carbon money. And then Angie touched on, or there was some discussion about the transit expansion, Southwest number 7 project for partial funding. I don't know that that is going anywhere here today. I know that was more of a low scoring project, but that was a question that was out there. Then of course the reconstruction modernization section. Does that seem like kind of the main points we've discussed so far?
Yep, I think so. Yeah.
You can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I'm just looking at my notes here too. We did start a key differences sheet that when you're ready, Mr. Chair, we'll bring up on the screen and then see if people have other things that they want to add to it.
Yeah, why don't we move to that just because we had kind of a silent point here, and then maybe this will generate some more discussion.
Chair, I had one quick question. Some of the comments were related to geographic balance. I didn't see that in the handout. Maybe I missed it, but that got brought up. But I'm curious if you had time to rerun those so we'd have information on that topic.
And are you asking for us or more for TAB, Nathan?
Well, I think it's a similar theme to what Tab brought up in some of the polling questions. Is sometimes it's hard to answer the next question without the information. And I think in that regard, we had a couple questions come up, and I know that that's a quick turnaround for Met Council staff, but I believe that hasn't been updated or time yet for that topic.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and members, that would be correct. That's kind of the next step in the process, is to update the maps and geographic balance and some of these other ancillary tables that were in that original handout to F&P.
So that'll take obviously some time. I know you guys quickly turned around this other updated memo from the TAB meeting yesterday. So I'm sure that'll be an exercise.
Yeah, I imagine the next day or two we'd be done with that.
Okay. And would you be willing to send that out to the committee as a follow-up?
We would, yeah.
Okay.
So Joe, Barbeau, do you want to jump in here on what you've put together?
Sure, Steve. So this is just a summary of the projects that are the scenarios rather that Steve shared as of this morning or as of this meeting. And it's just a little way to, we had first, as Steve mentioned, we had first talked about having pros and cons a little more highlighted, but there really haven't been that many so far. So we're sort of doing more of a comparison, and you can see this by mode. Roadways versus transit versus TDM, and then by category, and then some other stats. There's not a lot of staggering differences amongst the three scenarios, but you can see by, if you're interested in, how many resubmittals are being funded, you've got that 11, 12, and 12. So just a little comparison on some of the things some people might be interested in terms of the number of projects. This is all number of projects, except for the bottom few rows where it's project location, counties, which of course all 7 counties are funded regardless at some point. Cities and townships, how many projects touch each city or touch the number of cities and townships, and then unique applicants being funded. So Again, these differences are not too staggering, but something to look at.
Thanks, Joe. And do you have a table that also includes the carbon reduction?
I'm sorry, I should have clarified that. This does include the carbon reduction.
Does or doesn't?
Does. We sort of are looking at, because there's not carbon reduction alternates A and B so much per application, we just rolled this all together. So this does include carbon reduction. It does not include unique projects. I think that that's all that's not included.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we thought it painted a fuller picture if you brought in the carbon money to really see, okay, this in the end, this is the full list of projects you're going to get. So a few times not to get into the details, but a few times if you were to look at it without the carbon money, you'd show, say, for instance, different amounts of safe routes to school projects, but in the end, each scenario is funding every safe routes to school project on the list. So,
right,
that's the full picture, really.
Right. No, I just kind of get a chuckle out. We have $100 million extra dollars, and we're still trying to set this perfect line with the award. So it's just, we could get $1 billion and still be having the same discussion, I'm sure. Angie, you have your hand up. I see.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. One more technical item. I know this was referenced in the slides, but it would, so it's related to the bike and pedestrian with then the transit modal funding, to basically extra funding to the bike and ped. That is in the slides. It puts it over the modal maximum range. So it's at 21%. That from a technical side, I would not be able to support that because TAB already established those ranges as the maximum. So essentially TAB would have to revert back on what they established for the solicitation. But it does surprise me that it's being shown that way, but that is a concern because it's not what was approved for the solicitation. Thanks.
Okay, and sorry, I didn't catch that part. Which one is the 21%? Which category? The PED?
So the orange, essentially bike ped, which is to the maximum of the range, and then plus extra bike and ped, essentially moving the transit modal funds to bike and ped, puts it over the modal max that was approved for the solicitation.
Okay, and would you rather see that in modernization?
Or transit, or roadway or transit. It essentially can't go to bike and ped as what was approved unless, I'll acknowledge that any body can make a new rule, but that was the established modal range for the solicitation. So it would need to go to one of the other modes.
Okay, and Steve, if that did happen, if that extra transit money doesn't go to bike and ped, which projects would get taken out?
So the difference in that case is $3 million between, in B1 it's going to roadways, and in B2 it's going to bike ped. So you're asking, is there a specific project?
Well, I'll take a step. Let's not talk projects, but what I'm hearing from Angie is she would rather see that money, that excess money, shifted more into roadways or transit. I'm just recapping what she said. So no question for you, Steve.
I think that's a good technical comment to either put it in this chart or after the chart. And TAB can, as Angie said, TAB has the discretion to go outside the modal funding ranges, but that's something that they should at least know about from a technical standpoint.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Just to clarify, though, when they were polling yesterday, Steve, we made that aware to them, correct? That was information we provided as part of the polling.
Yes. Yep.
So TAB was aware of that already when they made the decision to give us this technical direction.
Correct. They did ask about how much would it go over, and it might have been, depending on what the amount was, like 1%, maybe 2%. And so they did want that information brought to them so they could decide.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, if we as a technical committee have a suggestion that we should stick to the original, I mean, that's a technical recommendation, so we can still talk through that here today. And, TAB is going to do what they're going to do. Certainly, we want to make sure we have some consensus on some of these items today. All right, Steve, so your presentation covered basically business items 2 and 3, correct? So now we're just looking for some summary to give to TAB for both of those items, correct? You don't have another presentation for carbon reduction project selection.
No, we don't, and we'll have to change the motion when we get to it just slightly, because we're not doing the key differences anymore for carbon, like you said. So
okay.
So as I kind of see it, so far here, we've got people want to see the geographic balance information and consider a little bit more balance with the use of the carbon funds potentially. The B2 goes above the top of the modal funding range, just as an observation, and need a little bit more clarity perhaps on the bridge, what the committee wants to do on the bridges. Is there anything else that you've heard, I guess?
No, that looks about right from my notes here. Okay.
Mr. Chair, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So regarding the bridge funding, I'm a little bit confused on what the trade-off is. So if we took that, $5.5 million that's currently from the roads category and put it back into other road projects, and then funded that last project with the new IIJA funding, is that money coming out of MnDOT projects, or where does that money come from exactly? It seems like right now we're just being asked, do we want to fund more projects or fewer projects? And I think if that's the question, I think I know what the answer will be. So I'm not quite clear sort of what the trade-off is if we move that money around.
Okay, it looks like Mike from MnDOT.
That was me. This is Mike from MnDOT.
Oh, okay. Elaine, sorry, your hand.
And I'm not able to directly answer that question, but at the September TAB meeting, TAB had discussed the 10 million that they had set aside for bridges as a target, and they felt that that money should still be in there, and then that bridge money should supplement that. So you're getting more for bridges based on what the IIJA had set the new funding for. So that was why staff added that bridge in there, so that even though it's less than the 10 million, because there's so much of the IIJA money, that was in response to TAB's request.
Yeah, we have, Mr. Chair, so we have more bridge money out there to spend. And so I think the point is, if you want to do this, we would spend that money on bridges. We're being asked by MnDOT to keep a kind of running tally of how we're spending that bridge money. So if we don't spend it now, then we spend it next cycle to kind of keep up to pace with a roughly $4.5 million a year of funding. So I think in this case, there's enough money that you could use the bridge funding right here, and then you would free up and essentially go back to those projects that were on the list before.
But if we didn't use bridge funding, they wanted us to use the other funding to get all the bridges.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's essentially, do we want to spend that funds now or in a future cycle?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Chair and Steve, can similarly use the same talking point about the carbon reduction money is just bring ahead more funds if this is a tab decision? Like, we're just taking money from different area and using the regional solicitation is the, I guess, I don't know, portal or mechanism which you do that, and like how much appetite is there to start taking other funds and bringing it in? Because we could probably go a lot further down the list if we take that logic on bridges or the carbon reduction.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair and members, carbon reduction is a little different animal because we got direct guidance from the TAB and Transportation Committee on what to do there. And that guidance was to only use 2 years of money to wait for the statewide plan and other efforts to finish up. So yeah, I guess in theory you could do the same thing, and you could spend all the carbon reduction money on and keep going further down these lists too. Would be another. You could do that, but in this case, we got a cutoff of the 2 years, kind of told to us.
But in theory, it could be a pro or con that made it to run a list, not an exact like we're recommending it. Is kind of like the bridge thing. Is one option is using other sources of money or more.
Yep.
All right, Steve, I'll ask this question I do every time we have a solicitation. Can we name a time when TAB has gone away from the midpoint? I don't think so.
Not since 2014. No.
Yeah.
I think, didn't last year they shifted a little bit with the over programming to get that regional balance?
They might have, but I think they stuck to the midpoint scenario.
Yes, and then shifted off of as needed. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of things being discussed here, and I'm not really sure how to move forward. I mean, in my mind, it seems like, the midpoint and then trying to kind of split up between small and large PED projects makes the most sense. But I'm just the chair. I'm here to facilitate the discussion. So maybe that's something we can talk about. Okay, first of all, I think, geographic balance is important, is what I heard today. I heard that so we had extra transit money because of the rule. So, and right now, that is being moved over to PEDS, but it's exceeding the 20% to 21%. So what I heard, at least from Angie, maybe other people can pipe in, is if they already moved money away from transit and didn't put it into transit, I assume the only other place to put it would be roadway and maybe preservation, so modernization, reconstruction. Maybe let's talk about that. Angie's point about exceeding the maximum for PEDS by shifting the exit transit money to PEDS. Is there an appetite to provide some direction on maybe sticking to roadway preservation, which is more on the holistic, metro guidance plan and how to spend money instead of putting that towards new PED projects? And if we don't get consensus or anything, then we're just going to stick with kind of what staff has. So we'll kind of need to get some feedback and consensus on these items.
Mr. Chair, this is Cole. I don't ever, particular reaction to that. I do think that the idea of the modal funding ranges is a TAB decision. I don't really know that TAC has a role in advising them, other than pointing out, like we already put in there, that the difference, that it is over the funding range, but not a stated preference, because it says, in the solicitation, it says that's TAB's decision. But I did want to say, I don't know if it's worth, the table that Joe showed basically showed very, very close relationships between the number of projects across the modal categories in all the scenarios. I don't know if that's just something we should point out. These aren't that different of scenarios overall. You're getting a lot of the same number of projects by mode. It might be a different mix, subtly within the modes, but the tab discussion tend to focus on, should we be funding roadways more, bike pad or transit? And essentially, you get, other than one or two projects, you're getting about the same number for all the scenarios by mode. So I don't know if it's just worth us saying that as a technical group.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that was my point before. It's like we're trying to draw this fine line, but we have an extra 100 million here, and I mean, we could spin our wheels for hours. But I agree. I think the tab kind of has an idea of where they're already going to go. I think our purpose as a technical committee is more in the scoring and working with staff through that process. So I think we've taken it to where we need to take it, but now it's just a matter of listening to our members to see if we want to, take forward differences or highlight anything to tab while they're making their decisions. They may choose to listen to it or not, but as the chair, I just want to make sure everybody has a chance to do that. Mike, your hand is up again.
I think Innocent was actually before me.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I missed Innocent. Innocent.
Yes. I would prefer, B2 bike pets, AV plus extra to bike and pets, because probably we have more applications on that, and the remaining funding could be used for funding more projects because of the amount that the worth or cost, So that would be my preference.
Okay, thank you for that feedback, Innocent. Good to hear. So Innocent is leaning towards B2, and I don't know as an entire group we're all going to agree on, a certain scenario, but I think this is good for staff to hear that they can bring back some of this discussion to tab. Thank you, Innocent. Did you have anything else you wanted to add or?
No, just that.
Okay, thank you. Mike, I think you're next.
Thanks, Chair. One other thing I heard a couple of members yesterday at TAB mention is there's a presentation before the regional solicitation discussion about ADA work that MnDOT and Anoka County are helping to facilitate through a innovative contracting process. And the stat was mentioned that I think 70% of pedestrian infrastructure is not ADA compliant, and a number of TAB members kind of remarked that seems very, very high. And so, kind of based on that, I wonder if within the various modal categories, if we think about where there are the greatest opportunities to improve our ADA compliance, and obviously every project within a category is going to be a little bit different, but I would think that within the bike ped category, it's going to be generally those smaller pedestrian and safe routes to school projects compared to the trail projects are going to have more ADA work. And then within the roadway categories, it's going to be the modernization and the spot mobility. So again, in terms of some of the technical recommendations that we make back to TAB or to TAC, that might be something to comment on, just because it seems like it's of interest to a number of the members.
Hope you're on mute.
Thank you, Mike, for that feedback. Just writing that down. Yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing from staff, ADA and safety overall, there's a big theme with this tab about safety.
Chair, on that point, part of the conversation with TAB, I've only watched half of it, but some of the last parts I watched right before this meeting. Yes, there's higher volumes of crashes magnitude-wise, but typically bikes and peds make up a disproportionate percentage of severe and fatal. So I think there's a nuanced talking point of how we approach that. When we just look at this silo of regional solicitation, it's hard to grasp all the other funding sources, because there was some discussion about how are we over investing in peds, but when we look at the MnDOT tip, I think I remember seeing that we're talking less than 1% goes to multimodal, and there's hundreds and hundreds of $1 million that going to roads. So I think it's about what some of the priorities are for this big specific pot of money for local organizations. And then one other point that did get brought up is, yes, there is multimodal in the road projects, but there's also road elements that are part of bikeway projects. And overall, from what we've seen through national and local guidance, if the street is safer for walking and biking, it is safer for people driving as well. So I think that talking point about multimodal being in roadways goes the same for bike and ped, making the street safer for cars, people walking, people biking. So there's just a few observations that I had from some of the TAB conversation.
Okay, yeah, great comments and observations. Yes, I agree. Thank you, Nathan. Okay, meeting's adjourned. Steve, any well, I'll open it back up to members. Do we have any other, from those that we haven't heard from? I know we've heard from a handful of folks. Anybody else want to chip into the discussion here? All right, it doesn't look like it. All right, Steve, you're gonna have to help me out here. So I think you and I have kind of recapped where we're at a few times during the meeting. We've gotten some good feedback from individual members, noting some of the differences in the scenarios. I don't know that we're gonna make any motions here today, or have much consensus, just because everything is so tight. But I guess I would ask if anybody has any further discussion, or they want to bring forward any official motion or action from this committee. I think staff has a lot of the notes and the discussion from today that will help inform their decision. But I would be remiss not to ask if there is a strong preference to take a motion or an official recommendation to tab on any of the technical portions of the discussion today.
So this goes to TAC next, and would they make a recommendation potentially with having more information than just getting something right before the meeting?
Steve?
Yeah, our intent of the last couple cycles was not to have a technical recommendation. There's not a staff recommendation either on what scenario we like. What's the recommended motion today is that F&P forward 3 funding options back to TAC, along with a list of key differences for each option and other technical feedback. That's the way we wrote it. Versus saying we like option whatever.
Right.
Yep.
Right. So, we have the 3 scenarios here. We've had some good feedback. Cole, you have something to add here?
Yeah, I think it'll build off of Craig's comment. A lot of folks were reacting to this information today, and the TAB meeting was just yesterday. I don't think this is something to put in the actual motion, but I do think encouraging the TAC members who have a little bit more time to watch the TAB meeting, because I think there's not just pointing out technical differences, but any feedback that TAB was giving about why they prefer certain types of investments to alleviate certain problems that they perceive in the system. It's good for TAC to think about if we could provide any feedback on those kind of statements. similar to what member Coster was bringing up, if you watch the meeting, you can hear some themes come out from different members, and they're making a lot of connections to the investments they're going to make and how they'll help with those issues. And I think that's an area where we have the expertise to maybe provide some of that comment. So I'm not saying we can do that today. Obviously people have to go back and watch the TAB meeting, or maybe Steve, I don't know if the minutes are going to be detailed enough, but it's a pretty long conversation to summarize and read. So
Yeah.
that might be my recommendation, is that we just forward some of the comments we had today to TAC to consider, but ask that they spend a little bit more time formalizing comments to bring to TAB after having kind of all listened to the TAB meeting. It is a pretty quick turnaround for folks to sort of react to what happened yesterday. And I don't know, Steve, what that motion would look like. Maybe it's just, forward the 3 scenarios and have TAC consider the discussion at F&P to bring comments to TAB or something like that.
Yeah, Bethany, do you want to, or Joe, either one of you want to kind of bring up that action transmittal top part? So we got something on the screen. Yeah, page 1 of that PDF, yeah. So that would be the motion at hand. Did you hear a consensus on the bridges? You want to, people want to hold tight, make that change, or?
Scott?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Just a couple comments, I guess, listening to all this, a couple things that are kind of popping out to me here, that were said. I don't know that we should take an official vote on the bridges, but I think it's important that the TAB understand that there is an option to fund the last bridge with bridge funding, which would make 5.5 million available to fund some additional road projects. I think it's important that they understand that. I think another thing that I heard was that by virtue of funding the 2 unique projects that resulted in less bike and ped projects potentially being funded. I think it's important that they understand that as well. Not that we have to weigh in on whether that should or shouldn't happen, but I think they should understand those 2 issues. I think were the 2 things that I wanted to elevate. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Scott, for those couple points there. Unique projects which had their own process, and they're taking away from some of the more tried and true score type projects, and then the 5.5 million in bridge to get that last project funded, but would still have $5.5 million available. Did I capture that right, Scott?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, great feedback. Elaine?
I would like to add on, I just comment on the unique projects. The funding was set aside last round by TAB for unique projects, so it's not taking away from other projects. By not fully funding the unique projects that were submitted, it's actually adding to the bike ped. I think the messaging isn't that they're taking away from bike ped. It's if they don't fund all the unique projects, they would fund more bike ped. And that was discussed at TAB yesterday, that this funding was unique project funding.
Okay, maybe I misunderstood Steve at the beginning, but I thought he said that by funding the second unique project that resulted in less bike ped potentially being funded, or did I misunderstand that?
No, No, I think you got that right. I mean, the bottom line is the unique projects, it depends on how you interpret it, but it's taking away money from other categories. And, you know, the tab, and Scott or Elaine, maybe you can weigh in on this, but I thought I recalled hearing that the tab wasn't initially too impressed with any of the unique projects. And maybe that's something they have to consider is, do they want to continue to fund, you know, 3 of those projects, or do they want to shift that? I think that's the point that Scott's making.
Yeah, I can actually give you some. There was a scoring committee of 12 tab members who ranked those projects. They rated them, I guess was a way of saying it, because their scoring was done differently. They just were given 1 through 5 points for each of the 6 measures and how they rated against the others. So they were looking at how did these projects rate compared to what we were looking for. And they did have a discussion of that it wasn't the type of projects or uniqueness that they were looking for, but they also felt that maybe they didn't define what they were looking for well enough. So they wouldn't want to penalize the applicants who followed what the application did, you know, requested for information. So the scoring committee, the policymaker group, recommended funding the TBI and 1 project. Options were just the TBI, 1 project, or 2 projects. They did not want to fund 3. So the recommendation coming out of the scoring committee was to fund the TBI and 1 project, which is then in the tables that Steve put together, staff put together for TAB, had put that funding in a trail project. And so by TAB saying, no, we want to fund 2 projects, we had to pull that money back. So it was unique project funding that was set aside last round. So it wasn't this round's money, it was last round's money. But if it's not spent, that would go back into the pot to reallocate. And then at the end, they went with 2, and that 700 some thousand that's left, they did not decide where they wanted it to go because they didn't know what scenario they would come up with. So if it was the bike heavy, they'd probably put it in roadway. If it was the midpoint, they'd put it in bike ped. It was the way it seemed like it was leaning.
Okay, thank you for that. Cole, you had a follow-up?
Yeah, I just wanted to really emphasize what Elaine said, and I really think we shouldn't include any comment like that. You know, Tab did a poll yesterday. Of course, it wasn't an official vote, and correct me if I'm wrong, Steve or Elaine, it was overwhelmingly in support of funding the 2 projects. And so for us to say, you know, Tab, we want you to reconsider this, it's just going to reopen a discussion that they had for probably 45 minutes yesterday, and they did a poll that said, you know, overwhelming support on TAB for funding the 2 unique projects. So I don't want to kind of have the technical feedback reopen that conversation for TAB. It's just going to eat up a lot of their time potentially.
All right, thank you for that perspective.
Chair, this is Jason from Hennepin. Can I just try to summarize what we just said? So
you can try. I don't know if you're going to be correct.
So based on TAB's initial preference for the unique projects category, there would be around 700,000 of unawarded unique projects category funding. And then if there was interest in redistributing that to the 2022 solicitation and other categories, that 700,000 would be applied to a category depending on which colored scenario is chosen. So for example, if the light blue option was chosen, then is it really only going to go to the bikeway category since there's no more unfunded projects in the pedestrian or safe routes to school category?
Yes,
Steve?
Mr. Chair and members, that's the way we have it now. But once you, I mean, it's not that much money, $700,000. So once you get down to the end, and then we start looking at the whole program and saying we have this meant, you know, we got $500,000 left, and do you want to fund a project here or there? It's kind of, you're left with the remainder out of a couple different buckets. So you know, that's kind of the last step in the process is, do you have enough kind of money built up between a few buckets and the remainders to make something happen or not?
And that's why Tab wanted to wait till the end, until they figured out what they would add in.
Okay, thank you.
Hey,
Thanks,
Stephen
Rick.
Lane, a follow-up to that is, I feel like I remember almost all of Tab who spoke up did express a preference for getting all the PED and Safe Route funded, or as many as possible. Is that correct?
Correct. I mean, specifically, we're saying small projects, but when they were saying what they preferred, it was carbon option 2, and then it would mention safe routes to schools. But so the carbon, when we gave them 2 proposals, it was mostly funding. The option was the pedestrian and the safe routes to school. So I think that's what they were meaning, only though they specifically said safe routes to school. So, but the projects are similar. Just pedestrian or sidewalks, and safe routes to school or sidewalks near schools.
Okay, that's good to know. And I think in regards to like the modal categories, about the cap or what the ranges are, I'd be curious to see how TAC and Tab feel about that at like 21%, that's slightly over 20. But I think we're all aware of that probably looming conversation of how we look about geographic balance and not getting down to that Scott County project. I'm not going to make a motion on it, but I think, you know, a couple of cycles have shown this, to be that if we don't get projects to all the applicants, that becomes very challenging. So those 2 things layered on together will make for some very interesting conversations at TAC and likely Tab next month.
Mr. Chair, do you want to see if we can get a motion on the table here? We do have a few other items to get through today.
Yeah, so who is it? Cole making a motion about moving the 3 scenarios forward with some of the differences discussed today? Was that Cole that was starting to make a motion?
Yeah, sure. I can move that motion. I think I don't have it right up in front of me, but essentially forward the 3 scenarios to Steve. Did we say to Tab or to TAC?
We put to TAC. Maybe put that back on the screen so he can just, Bethany, if you wouldn't mind, please.
So forward the 3 funding options to TAC, and I would amend it to say along with a list of key differences and any other technical feedback. I don't know if we need a full list because we kind of talked about a couple of different things.
Yeah, and I think Steve and I have a good recap on the list of the items discussed. So I'm sure they could put that in the memo or at least within the minutes on our discussion. Does that sound fair, Steve?
Yes. Yep.
So along with key differences for the options and other technical feedback. Yeah, okay. Does that look right, Cole?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we have a motion by Cole. Do we have a second?
This is Joe Ayers Johnson. I'll second.
Okay, who is that?
Joe Ayers Johnson, Washington County.
Okay, thanks, Joe. We got a second by Joe. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, staff could take the vote.
Okay, OJ,
Aye.
Jensen,
No.
Babish,
Aye.
Piper,
Oh, aye.
thank you. Merrick,
Aye.
Jensen,
Aye.
Ayers Johnson,
Aye.
Kotsukos,
Aye.
Hinneker,
Aye.
Janowiak,
Aye.
McCartney,
Aye.
Brown,
Aye.
Ao,
Hi.
Samuelson,
Aye.
Spooner Walsh, Nancy, Pacone,
Aye.
Keel, Omi,
Aye.
Ellis,
Aye.
Kozlucher,
Aye.
Ashfeld, Thompson,
Aye.
Coster,
Aye.
and Weber.
Aye.
Okay, and that motion passes. And I think that was a really good discussion. And like I said, I think our purpose as a technical committee is mainly during that scoring process and kind of getting everything together to this point where TAB kind of takes over these policy and geographic decisions. All right, next item is the Highway Safety Investment Plan Project Selection. Steve.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, did you want to do a, we do have a separate action item for carbon reduction, right?
Yeah, I thought, yeah, okay. We should have rolled that into the motion.
Yeah, I think.
Okay. All right, let's have another hour discussion. All right.
Yeah. I mean, this one's gonna be pretty quick. We don't have options, but so I think the motion we'd request would be more along the lines that TAC Funding and Programming forward to TAC. Any technical feedback on the carbon reduction funding options.
Okay, and I think you and I have the notes and the recap of that discussion today, so I think it's fair that that motion seems appropriate, and I can get you my notes as well. But you know, we heard some of that from Craig and others on that funding. So we'll need a motion and a second on this item.
Mr. Chair, this is Scott. I will move Steve's motion that he suggested.
All right, thank you, Scott. We got a motion. Do we have a second?
This is Innocent Ayo. I will second the motion.
All right, Innocent seconds. Any further discussion?
Can you state the formal motion again?
Yeah, the recommended motion is that TAC Funding and Programming forward to TAC any technical feedback on the carbon reduction funding options. And in that, I have my summary notes, staff has their notes. So we would just recap our discussion today. So that's the formal motion, is really what you see on the page here. Angie?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just add one technical comment to make sure that TAB is aware that these funds can be used on projects in all modal categories, including any unfunded transit projects, or it's more limited, but traffic technology projects, or basically roadway projects that reduce carbon. So I do understand that TAB wants to use these funds in this modal range, but since it's a new program, I wanted to add that, as I know there were some slides that were sent out to the committee earlier that really had some good information about the new program. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Angie. And maybe a question before we vote on this with staff is that something that we can highlight in the memo to TAC and TAB to provide that clarification that Angie discussed?
I can add on to that. This was discussed at TAB yesterday. The one limiting factor on the carbon funding is for the years 2023 and 2024. And staff did look at the traffic management technology projects, and none of them had requested the earlier funding, so we couldn't even select those. So it's limited to the projects that can go earlier too, because of the years of funding. And so it kind of limits which projects can start quickly in the early years.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And just, I would just emphasize in the memo somewhere,
Yep.
the flexibility of those funds, just to get to Angie's point, would be great. Okay, any further discussion before we vote on this item?
Chair, this is Jason from Hennepin.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of information thrown our way this week, so just a quick logistics question. If you scroll down on this action transmittal to like page 3, I just want to confirm that the potential scenarios shown here are no longer applicable based on what's taken place this week. Because we introduced that third funding scenario, and then I kind of adjusted these 4 into like 2. Am I thinking correctly?
Steve?
Yeah, that is correct, and probably a good good clarification that, yeah, the tables attached are no longer relevant. It's the ones that were sent out.
Yeah, because those were revised. You should have received those like a half hour before this meeting.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Okay, I will ask staff to take the vote.
OJ,
I got a question. So
Yes.
is it in regard, is the vote for the motion on the table with the updated charts?
Yes, that's my understanding, is it would be based on the updated charge that our committee received before our meeting today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Aye.
Benson,
Aye.
Babish,
Aye.
Piper,
Aye.
Merrick,
Aye.
Jensen,
Aye.
Ayers Johnson,
Aye.
Kotsukos.
Aye.
Hiniker,
Aye.
Janowiak,
Aye.
McCartney,
Aye.
Brown,
Aye.
Gale,
Hi.
Samuelson,
Aye.
Spooner Walsh, Picone,
Aye.
Omi,
Aye.
Ellis,
Aye.
Kozlucher,
Aye.
Ashfeld,
Aye. Aye.
Thompson,
Aye.
Coster,
Aye.
Weber.
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes. Next item, Steve?
Yeah, last action item here today is the Highway Safety Improvement Program, and nothing has changed on those tables. That is still the same. So the tables are attached. You did hear the presentation last month from Corey at MnDOT. So the motion that's being requested is that TAC Funding and Programming recommend that the TAC recommend the tab approval of the attached 38 projects for funding through the Hsip solicitation and inclusion of all urbanized area projects in the draft 2024 through 2027 tip.
All right, thank you, Steve. Do we have any discussion on this item? Or questions for Steve?
Chair Steve, this came up last month in the meeting minutes, but I just wonder if the methodology and project selection by MnDOT, if that's some like guidance they could share of how that's done, because it sounds like, you know, it is likely done by the amount of applications, which if we did that in the regional solicitation, it would probably look a lot different. So I was curious if like that methodology just could be shared by MnDOT so we can understand it a little better going ahead.
So Mr. Chair and members, Nathan, are you asking about like how they split the money between projects active?
Yeah, just curious. I mean, with TAB and like a lot of regional policies, such a big focus on safety, TZD, Vision Zero, what have you, it'd just be curious if there was an established process of like how they're allocating money.
Yeah, so
Yeah, go for it, Steve, and then we'll get to Angie.
yeah, so Mr. Chair and members, a few cycles ago, it used to be 70% reactive, 30% proactive was written into the application. MnDOT went away with that 1 or 2 cycles ago, which made a little bit more arbitrary on the statewide area. On a statewide basis for the Greater Minnesota Solicitation, they've been flipping to more proactive than reactive projects, from what I understand. And so this would follow suit what they're doing on a statewide basis, which is funding more proactive relative to reactive. So there, it's I think your request is, should there be more kind of guidance on how that decision is made in the next application? I think that is something we could forward back to MnDOT.
Thank you.
Yeah, that might not be a bad idea, and also talk about the scoring committee. I know there's a county engineer and a city engineer that participates with MnDOT. So that might be a good recap or informational item in a future. Angie?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to really bring forward our concern that 9 MnDOT projects are being funded with several local agency projects unfunded. MnDOT receives a dedicated Hsip allocation already. Our board actually included this in our public comments of policy concerns. So I did want to bring it forward. So it equals around 20% of the funding, and there are still several locally led projects that are not being funded within what's proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. And maybe this could be part of the discussion, informational item with Hsip and eligibility of agencies and maybe some of the historical practices. Molly, you want to add to that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. This is a comment we've heard in the past, and I think the last time we did the solicitation and the evaluation also reported out on historical numbers. The Hsip program is unique in Minnesota in that that the state DOT shares this with an MPO. Most other states don't. In fact, I don't know of any states that share it like this. Hsip is not regional dollars. It's not part of, excuse me, it's not part of the federal formula allocation to the MPO. So when MnDOT started doing this in the 90s, asking the region to help score and distribute the funds, it was from what I have heard, that we were not spending down our Hsip dollars and we are not meeting the goals for that. So the region is definitely helping MnDOT by having this process, but it is not necessarily federal funds for the region. And, if TAB wants to give some feedback to MnDOT, I definitely, folks are open to that. And I can pull up, when we bring this back as an informational item, we can pull up that the historical awards too.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'd be interested, and I'm sure some of our members, just about the history and how Minnesota is unique and who the actual decision makers may be for how things are split. So thank you, Molly.
Yeah, and just Steve was on that selection committee. We have traffic safety folks that really run that for MnDOT. So always trying to get more information out of that process is good.
Agreed. Any other comments before we move ahead? I don't think we have a motion or a second yet, so that'll be, or do we, Steve? I'm getting lost. I think we need a motion.
Yeah, I think so too.
Elaine, I'll move that we forward the list for approval, the projects selected in each category for the Hsip.
Okay, Elaine makes a motion as shown on the screen. Do we have a second?
I'll second. Kaslucher for.
All right, Kozlucher from Fridley seconds. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll turn it over to staff for the official vote.
OJ,
Aye.
Jensen,
Aye.
Babish,
Aye.
Piper,
Aye.
Merrick,
Aye.
Jensen,
Aye.
Ayers Johnson,
Aye.
Kotsukos,
Aye.
Hiniker,
Aye.
Janowiak,
Aye.
McCartney,
Aye.
Brown,
Aye.
Ao,
Hi.
Samuelson,
Aye.
Spooner Walsh, Pacone,
Aye.
Omi,
Aye.
Ellis,
Aye.
Kozlucher,
Aye.
Ashfeld,
Aye.
Thompson,
Aye.
Coster,
Aye.
Weber.
Aye.
Okay, and that motion passes. We have 3 informational items today, and maybe I'll just ask staff, how much time do you think we need for these items?
Dave, go ahead.
I would say for the information item that Tim Burkhart and I will be doing, we can pass until next week, or sorry, next month meeting.
Okay, so the first item we can go forward with the next meeting. What about Jeff in the second item?
Here, this is Tony Fischer, MTS. Jeff left the meeting already, so we can come back next month. Unfortunately, this will be going to the council the day before next month's meeting to provide feedback, but it isn't the last chance either. So both of these next 2 items could move.
Tony, is this going to TAC in November?
Yes, TAC and TAB in November.
So I might just note that this climate action plan did go to the TPP technical working group, which is encompassing of TAC planning last week, and it'll go to TAC. So we could certainly bring it to this group, but I would say it's going through a lot of different committees for review.
Okay, and then the last item, same thing, or?
Yeah, that's a project under procurement that we just wanted to brief the group on before we get started, and solicit any members to be part of the technical advisory committee, but that can wait a month too.
Okay, well, I will just quickly say, is anybody opposed to waiting for next month on these items? Does anybody oppose that and really want to hear some of these items now? Okay, since we do have that flexibility, I think we spent the majority of our time on the important decisions that need to be made today, and I appreciate the time of the staff and all the committee members that participated today. So with that, we'll move to other business. Any members have other business? All right, seeing none, we'll move towards adjournment. It's about 3:05, and thank you everybody for your time and effort, and have a great long weekend if you have tomorrow off. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Good discussion. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Molly.
Thanks, Michael.
Hey, anything for you, Jerry? This isn't, this should be a paid position, I think.
Bring that up. Bring that up next meeting.
All right, I'll put that on the
Thanks,
other
Mike.
agenda
Okay.
item. So,
Have
all
a
right,
good
see
one.
you guys.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah.